Rob again. It's time for another member talk. And today we've got a very special guest coming to us from, I believe, Wisconsin. I think he said he was at. Well, that may not be true. We'll check into that here in a few minutes. But we have Ellery Bowker. And if you've been anywhere on social media lately, you've seen Ellery Bowker. He has a podcast. He and Wilton Hong have a podcast called Elevating Funeral Service. It's a weekly podcast that comes out. A lot of great topics on there, and we're going to talk with them about that. He also has a company called Aftercare Com, and we're going to talk with them about that. So without further ado, hello, Ellery. How are you?
Good, Rob. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. I've been, I first met you briefly in Chicago at the expo, and I saw your folder, Aftercare.com folder, the green folder, and I thought, what is this? And so I grabbed it and I brought it back to the hotel room with me. And I started looking through it that night, reading through it, looking at some of the products that are in it. And I thought, well, this is a great thing. You know, this is a cool program. I'm going to let you explain it a little bit because you can do it so much more justice. But I came back the next day and I really wanted to say hi to you. I didn't get to the first day because you were busy with some folks. And that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, talking to people. So I didn't want to interrupt, but I came back the next day. And they said, no, he stepped away from the booth for a little bit. So I never did get the actual chance to say hi to you in person. But this is great getting you on here. I brought your pamphlet back, Aftercare.com, and I've shown it to a number of people all over the state. And they agree. It's a great program. And what I'd like to do is kind of highlight that and have you talk with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. Thank you. And I hate I missed you in Chicago. Those conventions are just a whirlwind.
They are. Yeah.
It's so funny too, because you can talk to somebody for 10 minutes and then an hour later, if they walk back by you don't remember what you said to them, because
exactly.
it's just, you're always on. Let me back up a little bit. I'm from Wisconsin originally, but I've been in North Carolina for 20 some years now. So that's home to us now. So we're just east of Raleigh, kind of near the coast of North Carolina. So, yeah.
But you actually, if I remember correctly, were you born in or lived in the Northwest for a little while?
So I was up in your area. So I was born there. I was born in Portland, Oregon, in Multnomah County, and I lived there until I was 10. As you and I talked about, as soon as Mount St. Helens blew up, we left. And then we went to where my family is from, which is Wisconsin. And that's kind of where I spent my childhood. And so my early years were out where you're at there. And then the majority of my life was spent in Wisconsin. And then I moved down here early 90s. So
yeah, I think when that mountain blew, a lot of people left.
Yeah.
They're all coming back now. They forgot about it, but they're all coming back. But
yeah,
there was a mass exodus.
Yeah, so it was a coincidental timing. My father was from Wisconsin and had a farm there, and so we moved back there, and he farmed with his dad's place and all that. So that's how we ended up going back. But yeah, I mean, I still have family out in Spokane and Corvallis and Eugene and a lot of those areas out there. So it's beautiful, beautiful area out there.
Yeah.
But,
next time you get out this way, we're going to have you stop in.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, definitely love to. But yeah, so Aftercare.com is a company we started about 5 years ago, and we started it really with one premise, Rob, was that if you look at funeral service in kind of a three-legged stool, right, you've got, or in a continuum, if you will, you've got pre-need, you've got at-need, and you've got aftercare. And I've always believed that pre-need and aftercare were kind of the bookends of funeral service, right? And they're both important, but only one ever got attention, right, which was the pre-need, But I've always felt like there was this funeral home flywheel, and I've written about this before. And what I mean by that is, if you do a good job with pre-need, you're going to boost your at-need, okay? If you do a good job with at-need, you're going to create an opportunity for aftercare. And aftercare, if done correctly, should spawn more pre-need, right? And you kind of keep that flywheel going. And what we find is there's two groups of funeral homes that we've always worked with. One is what we call kind of the at-need hunters. These are people that don't really care about pre-need at all. They live in the at-need world, and that's it, right? And often in competitive markets, they beat the crap out of each other for $800 cremations, right? And it's just a grueling business. And then we've got some others that they really understand the value of pre-need, which I think in the competitive landscape we're in now, there's probably nothing more important than getting these families on the books now. So But we looked at aftercare and we thought, okay, if aftercare is such a good source of pre-need, right, and if families need this support, why aren't more funeral homes doing it? And the case was clear; they just don't have time to do it. That funeral homes are just, there's no set schedule, right? You guys are reacting like a fire station. As soon as the call comes in, you're jumping into action. And so we started looking around at some of the different aftercare programs out there, and there really wasn't anything that was just simple. Right. There was some very good people with some very good grief programs that were complex and required a counselor and just a lot of resources. And then we had some others that were doing some things, but they really couldn't scale it. And as software developers, we are a tech company kind of first. We thought that we could take a technology approach to it and kind of really build out a robust system that allowed personalization at scale. And that's something that's just never been in the funeral business before. So with our program, it's a very simple program. It's 4 cards and a survey for $20, right? And now we've included grief support books that can come with each card. Again, it's still $20. So it's literally the biggest no-brainer in funeral service as far as the value goes. But what we did was we created a super simple process where a funeral home literally enrolls the family. It takes about 20 seconds to do it. We've built integrations in with Passari and Kraken and a lot of the website providers now. So when they're adding the case to their software, they can click a button and it automatically enrolls them in Aftercare.com. So it kind of just takes everything off their plate. Yeah. And then kind of details about the program. So the family gets a sympathy card a couple weeks after the service. It's all branded with your funeral home's name, your signature, your message. Then they get a follow-up survey that includes a request to leave an online review as well. And then they get a card on the birthday of their loved one during the holidays. And the last one is on the anniversary of the loss. What we hear, we work with over 1,500 funeral homes. What we hear from all of our customers is that they just love how easy it is. They just enroll the family and they don't have to think about it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I would say that probably, this is just anecdotal, but I would say probably 90% of our customers have said to us that we want to do aftercare. We just have never had time to do it, or we've tried to do this on our own. And then as soon as we got busy, it fell by the wayside. So what they like about what we do is that the product is beautiful. It's very touching for families, but the value proposition is just so strong. And the ease of it is just so strong that it just makes it a wonderful addition to that. And we hear stories, Rob, that, I just heard one the other day where a funeral director customer of ours was in a grocery store. And he said this lady was kind of just hobbled over and just kind of took her all she could to come across the grocery store and hugged him and thanked him for the birthday card, because 2 days before that was her late husband's birthday. And our program times it out. We're tied in with the API of the post office, so we know exactly when the card has to leave our office to get to that family. And so we landed on that birthday typically as best we can. And the card had got there on her husband's birthday. And if you think about it, the birthday card as part of our program is very powerful because let's say that your mom has passed away on her birthday. You're probably the only one that even knows that, yet it's a very difficult day for you. And so to get a card from the funeral home that day saying, "Hey, Rob, we acknowledge this day is difficult. We're all here for you. We're praying for you," et cetera, is super meaningful. So stories like that, hearing the funeral directors get feedback from the families about how touching it was, right, and how meaningful that was. And the funeral director loves it because, he had no idea that card was going out in the mail to that lady. He enrolled the family 7 months ago. Yeah. And our system is automated, but it allows, and the card that she got was personalized. It had his signature in it. And so we just do really what they don't have time to do, but they really want to do. So,
yeah. Well, I'm looking aftercare.com on the website right now. And by the way, if you're watching this or listening to this, check it out. Go to aftercare.com. It's really a cool thing when you can see these cards. These are nice looking cards. I've actually held them in my hand. They're not dollar store cards. They're actually good quality stock. Yeah. You open it up, there's the logo of the funeral home, and this birthday one, for example, has the date of the birthday, and it says, "In every moment, love lives on, in remembrance of Joseph John Hood on this special day. Blessings," and then the signatures of the funeral staff or whoever you have that set up with. And that's really kind of a cool thing, because just the birthday, it comes out on the holidays, it comes out on the anniversary. And like you say, there's a sympathy card there. Very simple, very easy touches. And the fact that you don't have to try to remember, oh my goodness, I want to put this in my calendar so in 7 months I can send Joseph Smith, John Smith, whatever, his birthday card to his wife. You don't have to do that. It's already done for you. And that is really a cool thing.
One thing too that I think makes the program so attractive to a lot of the funeral homes out there is the nuanced capabilities we have to personalize it. So, for example, on that birthday card, you know, we put the date of birth in there, we put the name in there, right? So every card is personalized.
Right.
And when you talked about the signature, you can have, with our program, you can have whatever signature you want on there. So it could be the owner of the funeral home. A lot of times we'll have the family of the funeral owners. But what the real value, Rob, is that we have the ability to have it where it's the director that served that family.
Yeah.
So, for example, if your funeral home has 5 directors, when you sign up, we'll get all 5 of their signatures, put them into our system, and then when that family is enrolled, you just choose which director served that family, and all the cards going out would have his or her signature on it.
Yeah, that's who the relationship's with.
Yep. Highly personalized, and we've got it available in a couple different languages. Spanish being the next biggest one, obviously, but we've got it in Vietnamese. So we're in Canada now, so we're doing French Canadian. We're finishing that up, and so yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff with it. But so our goal was to make a system where you could have personalization at scale. And that just requires a lot of software that, you know, there's a lot of really good people that do card programs, but I think that kind of where we differentiated maybe a little bit, and they do a good job, by the way. I think where we differentiated a little bit was taking a technology approach to it, and kind of writing that software that kind of made it do a lot of the extra stuff that you maybe can't do at a smaller scale.
Now, cost-wise, I know it's very inexpensive, but $20 per family, is that right?
Yep. $20 per family. Yep.
So really, what is that? Even if you have the $800 cremation, it's $20.
Yeah. You know, we kind of take a look at it as just, I mean, this thing is about building relationships, you know, and that's it. You know, and so $20, honestly, it's a complete no-brainer. We're able to do it at that price because of scale. You know, we do thousands and thousands of families every week. And so we're able to do it at scale. We've got very good systems and processes in place. But truthfully, a funeral director would have a hard time going to buy 4 cards for $20, much less getting their logo on the stamps and the mailing and getting them out of here on time and everything. So it's, that's why we kind of call it a no-brainer. If you really want to follow up with families and you want to let them know you're thinking about them on specific days, there's just probably no better program out there. And then if you look at the website too, a couple years ago, we launched Aftercare by Text, which is kind of the same program, but it's by text messaging now. And that's been going great. It's been growing like crazy. That allows the funeral homes to really kind of serve the traditional and the modern family. And funeral homes use both. So if you are the funeral home owner and a family comes in and you think that family is better suited to get the cards, you can enroll them to get the cards. If you think they're better suited to get the text messaging, you can enroll them to get the text messaging. And so you can have both of them. And our grief program, Grief Steps, which you talked about with on another episode, the Grief Step program is a grief platform that we've created in conjunction with Dr. Jason Troyer, who's one of the preeminent grief experts in the business. So with the card program, we insert a grief support booklet with each card that's actually paired with a card. So the first booklet you're going to get is going to talk about the first steps in healing after a loss. The Christmas card or the holiday card you're going to get that's going to talk about how to get through the holidays. And then we have an online component. So if they're getting text messages, then they get access to the online version kind of that stuff there. So it's really interesting. We actually have funeral homes that are using the cards and the text messaging, and they're just deciding kind of on a family by family basis what they'd rather enroll them in.
So the card program is a per family, one-time charge per family, $20. The text is a monthly fee. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. And then that's unlimited, right? So it's $150 per month, and then you can enroll as many families as you want. And then if you have more than one location, we charge $25 extra per location. So a 3-location firm would pay $200 a month, and then that's unlimited. Funeral homes love the texting because it's unlimited. They can enroll as many families as they want. I'll tell you a couple interesting things that we've seen happen. If you're a funeral home owner and you have a family come in, and let's say in the arrangement room you have the mom, the dad's passed away, you have the mom, and then you've got, say, 3 adult children. Well, what they're doing now is they'll enroll the mom to get the cards,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll enroll all 3 children to get the text messaging. And
Makes
so
sense.
because it's unlimited, it kind of lets you cast a wider net. And because the product is either kind of traditional or modern, it lets you kind of get each family whatever you want to get them. So again, it's very simple. You just say, enroll this family to get the cards, enroll this family to get the text messaging. Just a couple clicks of a button.
Well, and contrary to some beliefs, that's where we're going. Text messaging, technology, computers. I mean, even emails are almost outdated anymore. It's people are wanting that text message, that quick little soundbite that they can just look at, check out, reply to, and go to the next spot. So I think it's great. I think it's great that you guys have added that. I think it's great that you can do both. The people that want the cards, I've seen them. They're awesome. They're really a cool thing, and especially with Dr. Troyer's booklet in there. That's a wonderful addition to it because it's something tangible. It's something that is provided by a funeral home, and it helps families, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I will tell you one aside with the text messaging. So back to the story about the lady that, that saw the funeral director at the grocery store and thanked him for the card. The feedback is, you don't always get feedback from family that gets a card. They're not always going to call you and thank you for that. But the text messaging, we probably get close to half of the people respond to that.
Right.
So if an initial text message goes out that's just basically saying, hey, Rob, this is Ellery at the funeral home. Just want to check on you and see how you're doing. We're getting between 40 to 50% of the people that are responding saying, thank you so much. You guys did a great job, et cetera. So a lot of what people have always thought, the texting now gives them a vehicle to respond and tell you what they're thinking. So
Right.
it's great. It's really great.
Well, the cool feature too with the text that I see on your site is it does give you the opportunity for the immediate feedback by replying to the text, but it provides you with the survey. And then as well, you can take that survey and you can actually add it by simply clicking to Google, Yelp, Facebook, and rate the funeral home, which of course drives business because as we know, even funeral homes with long-standing relationships with the community, what we're seeing now is business is being driven by what they're seeing on their cell phone, what they're seeing on the review process. It's not the fact that you've been in business in the same location for 100 years. It's you got 5 stars from so and so, even though I don't know that person, the fact they gave you 5 stars is going to lend more credit to me using you in the future. And this is a great way to do it and puts it right in front without actually going and saying, hey, do you mind when it's all said and done, can you go on to our Facebook page and rate us? Because that's always a hard thing to say. This gives you the ability.
It's definitely a great vehicle to get the online reviews. We've found in our experience is that one, funeral homes have hundreds or thousands of happy families, right? That walk out of that funeral home that just are super grateful for what the funeral director has done for that family. And they're happy to go leave a review, but I think there's 2 things that must happen to get a review. I think you have to ask them and you have to make it easy.
Yeah.
And funeral directors don't like asking them. And then just telling you, hey, go online, leave me a review is not easy. So what Aftercare.com does is we ask them in a nice way, right, at the right time. And then we make it easy by putting a link in front of them. They just click the link and they can start typing. So it definitely makes it easy. And, we've got funeral homes that have gotten tons and tons of reviews directly attributed to us putting that message in front of that family and asking that family for a review. So not only do you get to reach out to that family, let them know you're thinking about them, but you can also get something back out of it because you're exactly right. Reviews are everything right now. We did an episode on our podcast a while ago that we talked about reviews and I mentioned there that if you think about reviews, think about it like you're driving down the road and the reviews are either 100 people out in front of a building saying, hey, come use this building. These guys are great, right? Or a bad review is like people with picket signs saying, hey, Rob, avoid this business. So think about reviews that way. And, if you don't have a lot of reviews right now, you should be doing everything you can to get them because they matter more than you'd ever imagine. And they're going to continue to matter even more as you go forward.
Well, I want to switch gears on you just for briefly. Not really switch gears, maybe a half a gear.
Sure.
You mentioned it at the beginning. You see pre-need on one end, aftercare on another, kind of bookend the at-need. But what I find is most people combine pre-need and aftercare as the same thing. They consider them the same thing, but really those are two very different components to funeral service. Aftercare and pre-need, unfortunately, they get combined. And when people say, "Oh, well, do you have an aftercare program?" Yeah, we're writing pre-needs left and right. Well, but that's not an aftercare program.
Right. Yeah.
Explain that a little bit. Especially, we've got a lot of people that listen that maybe are new to funeral service and don't quite understand that. Explain that a little bit of what the big difference between those two is.
Yeah, that's a great point because you do often see them lumped together. When we started Aftercare.com, Rob, one of the things that we wanted to do was to provide a standalone aftercare program. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so agnostic of any third-party marketer, any insurance company, or any other program, we just wanted to have true aftercare. Aftercare needs to be altruistic. You know, it can't be driven by a need for pre-need. Okay, so I think if you look at aftercare as a lead source only, right? Much like you would direct mail or lunch and learns or anything like that. I think that you're going to not see the results you want, right? And you're probably going to give up on it, or you're going to see the cost too high. Aftercare should, I think, first and foremost be looked at as support. You know, you need to support that family. Now, that support could come in the form of grief support, right? Grief resources. Some people don't need grief resources. Some people just need to know somebody's thinking about them. I remember reaching out to some people in our church one time after they lost somebody, and hearing comments like, it's just so nice to know somebody's thinking about you. So getting the card on the birthday of your mom, or during the holidays, and some of these difficult things. So I think aftercare can take a couple of different forms. It can take, full-on grief support, right? It can take the form of helping families close estates. It could take the form of just letting people know you're thinking about them, but it has to be for the right reasons, right? So it has to be not because of that. I've always said that I think that pre-need should be a byproduct of a good aftercare program. It shouldn't be, pre-need shouldn't be the reason you're doing the aftercare program. And so I think the reason you see them lumped together is because typically prior to us, I think the only people that were really offering an aftercare program were the pre-need folks, right? And they did a good job. But what we found was that some of the insurance companies, or particularly some of the third-party marketers, right, some of the larger ones, particularly would have an aftercare program, and they often had the aftercare program as a lead source. But what we found talking to a lot of these third-party marketers, Rob, was that a lot of them had an aftercare program because they felt like they had to have it, but it really wasn't in their wheelhouse, right? And so they didn't really put a lot of attention to it. They didn't really put a lot of thought into it. They just had it there as part of their pre-need offering, right, that they would offer to the funeral home. And so I think that, a good aftercare program is different than a good pre-need program. And I think the motivations for both are separate, but if done correctly, they can both feed each other and they can both go hand in hand. So I think the kind of the lumping together is just based upon who was doing it, in the past. And now I see a lot of other companies now that are coming out with aftercare offerings, and I'm glad to see that. It validates the idea. It validates the fact that it needs to be done. And I think now funeral homes now probably are having to spend more time, and they're probably more intentional on building relationships now than they probably have ever been done before. And so aftercare is just the best way to build relationships. And I'll say two other things about this while they come to mind. One is that the funeral business is super competitive. Obviously, we know that. But the one place you don't have competition is in aftercare.
Yeah.
Right. This is your family. You've already served this family, so you now have a unencumbered opportunity to build a solid relationship with this family. You're the only one. It's yours to lose. Okay. And a lot of funeral homes lose it because they're kind of on to the next family. Right. And just because of that reactive nature to funeral business, this family kind of is left to kind of go home and adjust to their new normal, right, or adjust to life now without their loved one, while you're kind of on to that next family. So it's an unintentional consequence of funeral business, or funeral service, but nonetheless, it's still disheartening to families when they go home, right? Because we talk about, oftentimes funeral homes talk about helping families kind of in their time of need, right? Well, a time of need doesn't end at the cemetery. Right. It's kind of just beginning at that time. So funeral homes, I think that intentionally reach out to families and be there for them in some form or fashion, whether it's very simple, like a card program, or something more complex, like a grief support program or, bereavement seminars or all kinds of other stuff they do. I think anything is better than nothing, but I think those that are doing it intentionally are going to see value, and they're going to see a lot of relationships being built on that. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, although it may be on an average, I think of every 7.5 years, you're going to be contacting the funeral home. At the end of the day, if you've served that family one time, you ought to be by default the first phone call they make, right, the next time they have a need. And if you don't, then that's probably your fault, right, because you didn't continue to build that relationship up with that family. So I think from a financial standpoint, the cost to acquire a customer is going up every day, right? And so to me, I think kind of from a business standpoint, that when you are able to earn the right to serve a family, you now have that family. I would consider them your family, but don't assume they're always going to be your family, right? You have to kind of put in that work after the funeral. And I've said this before publicly that, in any other business, it's called customer service, and in our business, we call it aftercare, and it seems optional, but in any other business, it's just service after the sale. Sure.
Well, I think it falls into the realm of how do you define your return on investment? A lot of times aftercare programs that are truly pre-need programs, but for lack of a better terminology, we call them aftercare. The return on investment is additional pre-needs. But for a true aftercare program that supports and helps and serves families long after that final goodbye or that final amen or whatever the case might be, that return on investment is the relationship. And it's the relationship, I believe, that continues to have those families coming to you, continues to, like you said, the lady at the grocery store that walks up and gives the funeral director the hug. He probably had no idea who she was because he's seen 15 other families or 100 other families between the time he met her and him. But that relationship was there that he created because of the fact that that aftercare program exists for that funeral home. So absolutely. I think it's a great way to look at it. And I think we need to really focus on, as you said, using them as bookends and creating that flywheel so that they all feed each other, but that they aren't lumped together as one service, aftercare and pre-need. We need to keep them separate.
Yeah. And I think if you look at any really successful funeral home, they're probably hitting on all cylinders, right? They probably have an active pre-need program. And I don't mean walk-ins only. I mean, they're deliberately going after, and marketing pre-need. They probably have a robust at-need program, right? And they probably have a aftercare program, and those things, the aftercare particularly is the intangible. It's hard to quantify. It's not as easy to measure as direct mail and some of the other pre-need efforts, but there's just no substitute. I don't think you'd find a really successful funeral home that didn't have some kind of an aftercare program.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears again and talk a little bit about the podcast. So back about, It looks like, I think it was about April or so, beginning of April, this new podcast popped up on various different platforms, Spotify and things like that. And here's Ellery Bowker and Welton Hong. And I thought, oh my gosh, I what is this going to be about? Because, I know Ellery from Aftercare. I know Welton from, I actually had just finished reading his book that he sent me, and talking about how to use, social media and Google and that sort of stuff. And I thought, well, this will be an interesting, it's almost to me, two different backgrounds coming together for one, but I've been intrigued listening to your podcast. Listening to both yours and Welton's podcast. It's called Elevating Funeral Service, and it's on all the different podcast places you would download. But it seems like it's a lot of technology in it, a lot of different ways, not so much of using certain softwares, but how do you work within the stuff that we currently have, the platforms that we currently have, like, talking about getting people into the funnel to service the families. There's all sorts of different topics on there. Tell us a little bit about how this podcast came to pass and kind of what the goal of it is.
Yeah, certainly. So Welton and I met a couple of years ago, and we kind of hit it off and became friends. And Welton and I probably share a pretty strong passion for technology and marketing together. And Aftercare.com is at its core is a tech business, right? It's a tech company, and we're software developers and web people. And so Welton and I just have a ton in common. And just throughout different conversations with Welton, we always talked about, you know, how we enjoy teaching funeral homes, and, you know, how there was just a ton of information out there, but there wasn't anything that we saw that really kind of, you know, zeroed on one subject, right? Or one kind of an idea. So I had this idea in my head, and I'm going to butcher this name. I think it's Kaizen. I think anyway, it's this Japanese principle that if you apply, you know, instead of trying to fix everything at one time, right, you take one thing, right, and you fix one thing, and then by fixing one little thing at a time, you know, over time, you make these amazing results, right? I think the math works out that if you have a 1% improvement every day, that at the end of the year you'll have a 37x, right? Not 37%, but a 37x improvement. Okay, so and that can be applied to anything. So I've always kind of looked at funeral service, and I've written about this quite a bit, as this continuum, right? There's this journey between, you know, when a funeral home selects your firm and the first time they ever heard your name. Okay. And there's just a lot of different personas in there, right? A lot of different ways that people can kind of get into that funnel. But every different place on there, I look at it as a touch point. And then I think about every touch point out there, and I think, okay, every single touch point, whether you want to believe it or not, the family has an expectation. Okay. And then are we meeting that expectation? So I do these things and I call them customer journey audits, but I think about this and I say, okay, if there's 7 touch points in there, we ought to know as funeral home owners, you know, what each one of those touch points are, right? Like one touch point would be answering the phone. One would be when they hit our website. One would be when they walk in our building. One would be when they pull up in our parking lot. And then let's try to figure out what that expectation is for that customer. And you really ought to know that, right? If you're the business owner, you ought to know your own consumer. You ought to know what that customer expects. So for example, if I am on your website and I am looking for a price, right? Or I'm a consumer, what does that customer expect when they come to that website? Do they expect to find a price? You know, yes, they do, right? And so what happens if they don't find a price? Well, that's called an unmet expectation. So it's kind of like if you're at Red Robin and you order the picture of the great big burger, right? The beautiful picture, and you get one that looks like the dollar burger at McDonald's, right? Every bad customer experience starts with an unmet expectation. So if your consumer expects one thing and they get something different, you're already starting off kind of on the wrong foot. So at everyone, and then I think about when they call your funeral home, you know, and you know, what do they expect you to say to them? What do they expect you to say when they ask for a price or they ask for information? And then so what my thought was that you could take a look at every one of these touch points and you could say, okay, what does a customer expect, right? That's the first audit. And then what are we delivering? Right. And then there's this thing called the expectation gap. And then how do we fill that? So the idea on the podcast, and this is a long answer, was that we wanted to say, okay, let's take a look at these little things in your business, right? And let's say, okay, what does a consumer expect, right? Or what is the status quo and what should it be? And then let's try to teach the funeral homeowners how to fill that gap, okay? Mm-hmm. And then, so it's kind of morphed into a lot of different things in there, but at the end of the day, the podcast is about taking one subject, right? One thing, and trying to talk about how's it being done now? What's a better way to do it, and then kind of how to fill that gap. And so, I don't know, we're 20 some episodes in now. We've had a lot of really good topics on there. We've touched on things like pricing online, GPLs, how to close more customers on the phone. There's a lot of different things, but we're really, really enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. We've got a lot of really good feedback from the listeners. And so if you're a listener, thank you for that. We're glad. You know, our family was the first listeners. So if we got people outside of our, you know, our core circle, we're happy with that. But it's been a lot of fun. And Welton is just is a dynamic guy. He has got more knowledge in him, I think, than 10 people in his industry, in his space. And so I learn a ton from him all the time. So it's a lot of fun.
Welton, yeah, we love Welton. He's actually been helping us with our newsletter. He sends us articles and things. We were planning on having him come out this last August for our convention. And of course, like most conventions, it got canceled. But I think we do have him scheduled to come out next year to Leavenworth. Awesome. to join us. So it's going to be exciting to see him again. But kind of going back, that concept, and I don't know, if that's the right word or not, but that concept of fixing one small thing and letting it grow, and then going to the next, it it started out, I think, at least what I'm seeing from funeral homes, good funeral homes have an owner or have a manager or have somebody in their team that has that concept down. They see that. So when they come to work, for example, they pull into the parking lot. They don't walk past the weed that's growing through the parking lot, asphalt. They go over and take care of it. It's because they know that the family's going to see that when they come in.
Right.
But the funeral homes that are really successful are funeral homes that have built a team of people that also have that same idea and that same desire to grow. And so I can think of a few, and I won't name them, but I can think of a few funeral homes that I know are just killing it right now, for lack of better terms. They're just going like gangbusters, and it's not because they've got the lowest price, but it's because they have the best reputation, and that reputation is built on the fact that when you walk in, you don't see a weed in the parking lot, you don't see paint chips or cobwebs on the building. You walk in, when you call on the phone, you don't get the guy that goes to that says he's going to put you on hold and transfer you and then accidentally hangs up the phone on you.
Yeah.
These are the people that train on this stuff. And as much as we don't like training, it's what we really all need, because it is that customer experience. I love that analogy of the nice, thick, juicy hamburger, and then you get the dollar store, because that's so much a comparison to a lot of funeral homes out there. We like to think we're the premier and the best of the best, but are we really? Are we giving our clients, our families, that true experience? And so that's a question we have to ask ourselves and be honest with ourselves about.
Yeah. I think it all comes down to one word, and that's empathy. Putting yourself in that customer's shoes. And so when you're talking about doing a customer journey audit, it's all about empathy, right? It's about me stepping into that customer's shoes saying, okay, if I'm a grieving family, right, and I've never planned a funeral before, and I'm coming to your website, what do I need to know? Right? What do I expect to see? I'll give you an example. So we obviously call in a lot of funeral homes. And I remember one day I pulled into a funeral home and I can't find the office. Right. And then I finally find in a little rhododendron bush is a sign about this big that said office. And I think this last C and the E was covered up by some bushes. Yeah. And this is about empathy, because the funeral home staff knows where the office is. They go to it every day. But if I'm a person pulling up in that funeral home for the first time, I don't know where that office is.
Sure.
So it's an easy win, right? Get a bigger sign, right? Get some more direction out there. And Welton and I talk about this all the time, Rob, but it's the easy wins. That's an easy win. It's so simple to do, but you don't think about it because we spend so much time, being operational, right? Like we just work in the funeral home and not on the funeral home. But if that same funeral home owner was paid to be a consultant at another funeral home and say, go examine this funeral home and tell us all the ways we could improve, he would point out that sign in the bushes at that other funeral home. Yeah. But he can't see the sign in his own bushes because he's so focused, or she's so focused on operating that funeral home day in, day out, day in, day out. And so I think that, we call it, and I didn't make this term up, but they kind of call it the empathy equation, right? Like, I mean, are you meeting, or what you're delivering meeting the expectation of that family, driven by empathy, and typically it's not. And it's not intentional. It's just because we're so focused, and as funeral home operators, they're just so focused on serving, right? They don't think about all these ancillary things that go into that customer experience. And so it is, it's one of those things where, I don't know if I don't know probably the right way to say it, but if they would spend some time kind of just stepping back, and just trying to look at it through the lens of that consumer, and even to the language we use, right? I mean, it's so easy to just use language that they don't understand, and I talked about this on our last podcast, but even the word direct cremation, that's not a consumer's word, right? It's our word. Yeah. They don't say, I'm looking for a direct cremation. You know, they say, I'm looking for something simple or just a cremation or, you know, words like that. So it all comes down, I think, to stepping back, Rob, and spending some time in this customer's shoes, and thinking like them, putting their hat on. And it's not easy to do, but if you can do that, you can deliver a better customer experience on a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Well, I think using that example of direct cremation too often, and I know it's happened, I've heard it repeatedly. You get that phone call, the person says, I'm calling to see what the price of cremation is. And immediately you say to yourself, direct cremation.
Yeah.
And that's the price you give them. I know
Yep.
some people that actually, instead of giving them a direct cremation price, give them the actual cremation, the individual itemized cremation price of what the actual crematory costs. And then when the family comes in and they're like, well, I thought it was $300 or whatever. And
Right.
you're saying, no, you got
Yeah.
to add this, this, and this. So it's really
Unmet
that, just
expectation.
that training of it all goes back to that expectation of what you expect when you walk in. Ellery, would you suggest or even agree with, um, funeral home owners, funeral home managers I mean, we can look back and we can say, okay, let's look at this through the consumer's eyes. But even if you've been there in that position for any amount of time, you still never get that those full consumer eyes that you're looking for. You're still going to walk right past your sign that's tied up in the bushes without seeing it because you know it's there. Do you think it would be wise to bring consumers in for other than to be a consultant for other than funeral, having to make funeral arrangements? Go out and get members from the public, whether they're not necessarily your family members, but just even create like a focus group and have them come
Yeah.
in and say, okay, tell me, if you were walking into this building, what are the improvements? What are the things that we can do that catch your eye, and a way to use that information to really kind of start that process?
Oh, I think it's a genius idea. You know, I mean, I think that any kind of, I think it would start by you having to be willing to be uncomfortable, you
Hmm.
know, and being willing to hear stuff that you don't want to hear, right? So many times we're so ingrained and our minds are made up, you know, that no one's going to change our mind, you know,
Yeah.
and so, you know, if I don't know, if you design the foyer of your funeral home, for example, right, you're vested in this foyer of this funeral home. So if I walk in and I say, Rob, this thing is dysfunctional, right? It just doesn't lend itself well to grieving families, for example, or whatever. You got to be willing to listen, you know, to that feedback. And really, really smart companies are willing to do that. You know, they're willing to kind of put their own ego aside, if you will, and really think about it from that consumer's thing. But I mean, I can't tell you how many funeral homeowners I know that have built funeral homes based upon their own designs, right, without thinking about the flow, right, of or how it should be done, or at least they didn't ask anybody. You know, they just made it up in their mind and they did it. I'll tell you an interesting thing. So there's a website called usertesting.com. That's just one of them. And let's say that you have a software product, okay? There is a company out there that what you're doing is you're actually paying people to test your product, okay? And so let's say that I had a CRM and I built it and I wanted to get people's candid feedback on it. You could sign up, Rob, to be a tester, right? And so what you do is you turn on your webcam and we're watching you on the screen, listening to you try to navigate our product, for example. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so you can actually see where a lot of the stumbling blocks are. So you can pull it up and you could say, okay, tell us what this website is, you know, what this website does. And there are people like, oh, well, it looks like it looks like they sell equipment for horses, you know, and it could be something totally different, you know. So it's all about getting that messaging right and getting that right. So companies spend a lot of money on that because the more clear you can make your message, right, and the easier you can make your product, the lower your acquisition cost is, the lower your churn rate is for your customers and all that stuff. So drawing a parallel to what you said, if a funeral home was to bring families in, consumers in, and say, look, you know, we'll give you a prize, a stipend, whatever. We just want your honest feedback, right? We're
Mhm.
big folks. We can take it. We just want to know what you think. Tell us what you think. Does this room serve this purpose, right? What do you think when you walk into this funeral home? What's the first thing you think? You know, is it functional? Does it do what you want it to do? What do you expect when you call a funeral home? You know, what do you expect when you talk to a funeral home? I'll give you another example, Rob. So I got an email one time from a funeral home, and this actually was a funeral we were planning, and the email was from some Hotmail email address.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people don't think that's a big deal, but for me, it just seemed super unprofessional because I didn't expect to get an email from a Hotmail email address, right? If you're
Right.
ABC Funeral Home, I would expect to get an email from Rob at ABC Funeral Home.
Right.
And while you don't think it's a big deal, I might suggest that you think about it another way. Let's say that you go to Bank of America and you're going to go get a mortgage. And the mortgage lady hands you a business card and says, Rob, I need you to email me these documents. And on that business card, the email was tylersmom2 at AOL.com,
Mm-hmm.
right? It just wouldn't match up. It just doesn't seem, professional. So it's those little tiny things I think that we don't think about, right, as operators, but they do matter. So I think you're absolutely on point. If funeral home owners would be willing to do that, I don't see a downside to them doing that. I only think that if they were willing to be open-minded and set some egos aside, I think they could learn a tremendous amount from it.
Well, I agree, and unfortunately, and well, I should say fortunately, I guess I don't know how you would say it. It's either unfortunate or fortunate, but we live in a time that there are so many different things that we can be doing, and everybody, it's well, this is very expensive. Let's do this. This is very expensive. Let's do this. But live streaming, for example, that's a prime example. COVID hits, everybody starts talking about live streaming. And what are we seeing? We're seeing a ton of people doing free live streaming on servers like Facebook or that sort of thing, which is, does it get the service out there? Yes. Does it get the service out there in a way that you can hear the songs? You can, when you're standing at the graveside, are you hearing all the wind that's blowing through and the semi truck that drives by and honks at you and all that stuff? It does that too. So live streaming is a prime example of there's 8,000 different versions of it you can do. It takes a little bit of time and investigation to really pick the right one and to run with it and not just say, I'm going to do the free one right off the bat and hope for the best and go from there. I watched a service the other day on Facebook. It was terrible. It sounded like they were in a hurricane, and all you could hear through the whole service, you could see the service fine, but all you heard was the wind rushing through the microphone of the cell phone.
Yeah.
And yes, cell phones, do they serve a great purpose of recording? Yes. Is it the best way to do it? Probably not. So,
Yeah.
we just need to spend some time and that's the hard part because we do get so tied up with, okay, we've just finished with this family, we're on to the next family. And then the next family and the next family. And when did we find the time to do this? We just have to make it. We have to create the time if we want to be successful. Otherwise, we'll be extinct eventually.
Yeah.
I think everything's just going to pass us by if we don't roll with it. It's going to pass us by, and then we're in trouble.
Yeah. Just one thing to say about your webcasting. Just a key thing to remember on that, because we've got some experience in that, is that you will always be judged. Your video will always be judged on the audio, not the video.
Yeah.
So it could be 4K video, but if you can't hear it, it doesn't matter, right? You'd rather have less quality video and better audio than vice versa. So invest in
a lapel mic.
Yeah, right. Get a lapel mic. I mean, they're not that, let me show you actually one thing. Hold on a second here. So this thing right here, if you guys are going to live stream, I'm going to show you this thing. They were hard to find. This is a pro tip right here. Let me see if I can get this in here.
What is that? Wireless Go.
Wireless Go, right? This thing is about $200. It's a wireless lapel mic. This thing literally has been on back order. I just got this in yesterday. It's been on back order for about 8 weeks now.
Wow.
Melton has one of these things. They are amazing. So it takes all these big clunky things. They're super small. You can clip them in your pocket anyway, this is the one you want to take a look at. Yeah. So I know several people that have those things and they're amazing.
It's funny because we try to do these things. And really, the truth is we are trying to do all of these things under the guise of we're doing this for the family. We are really trying to support and serve family members with these ideas. But some of the ideas that we see, I saw a video the other day, again, a graveside video, and this was something that happened I don't remember where it was. It wasn't in Washington, but the minister was standing next to the casket, and he had the bullhorn on the, with the shoulder strap sitting beside him, and he talking in kind of the CB microphone at everybody. And I'm thinking, it works, yes, but it's also from, I could hear that song Convoy in the back of my mind as he was talking. It's like, we got to step it in a little bit better than that. So
that's what they use in those hostage situations, isn't it?
Yeah. I was wondering what was going to come out, but it was interesting. So, well, Ellery, it's been a blast getting you on here. Aftercare.com. I can't say enough about it. It's just a cool, inexpensive program that families can do, whether it's the text messaging, whether it's the cards. I would highly recommend it. Look it up. If you want, and I'm not trying to sell a commercial here for you, but I know that I've seen this happen where I've actually I came back from Chicago. I called aftercare.com. You guys sent me a free packet and said, here, you want to test it out? Here's a free packet. Try it out. See what you think. It's no contract, $20. You get to pick and choose which families you want it to go to. If you have a family that you just think may not benefit from it, okay, don't sign them up for it. But if you have a family that is going to benefit from these cards, what's $20?
Yeah,
it's simple.
And that's a good point. You can choose which families you want to enroll. You don't have to enroll every family.
Right.
So if you've got, like, for example, if it's an infant that's passed away, a lot of times they won't enroll the infant, or if it's, if you buried the aunt or you cremated the aunt and, there is no family around, right? And that kind of thing, don't enroll that family. You don't have to spend money on every case, but yeah.
Well, and there's all sorts of examples of who you wouldn't give it to,
Right.
but there's just as many examples of who you would. And it's amazing because, you might say, I'm not even the spouse, for example, maybe the spouse just, after talking with the spouse isn't going to benefit from this, but the child, I can see just in this relationship building in the arrangement conference, I can tell that the child is really going to benefit from getting these cards. I'm going to spend $20. What is that? That's lunch and lunch and a coffee.
That's right.
Out of a whatever you charge for your funeral or your cremation, $20 is a drop in the hat, no matter what you charge.
That's right.
But what's going to happen is that person that gets that for the next year is going to have those touch points, and they're going to know that John Smith, funeral director, is thinking of me.
Yep. And
that's a great thing. So I highly recommend aftercare.com. Go check out the podcast too. That's a lot of fun listening to you and to Welton talk. Some of the stuff that comes up is just amazing. It's things you just don't think about. So check it out on all the different Spotify, and I'm sure you're on Apple and all the other places. I found you on Spotify, so I kind of use that mostly. But check it out. So Ellery, thank you. Do we got an email that you can share with us that we can put onto our video?
Yep. It's Ellery at aftercare.com. So it's just ELLERY at aftercare.com. And if any of the listeners want to email me, I'll give you a free trial. So on the cards or the texting. So let you guys try it for free.
That's really cool. That's a great feature. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Absolutely. Well, I hope to see you before I see you in August or October next year. Hopefully we'll be able to get face-to-face before then. But otherwise, I'm sure you're going to be at NFDA next year.
Yep, absolutely.
All
absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I'll look for you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Ellery Bowker, Aftercare.com, and Elevating Funeral Service Podcast.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
You bet.